네, 안녕하세요. 승승장구 이프로입니다. 오늘은 리플의 CTO 데이비드 슈워츠의 최근 코인데스크와의 인터뷰 내용 이제 2부로 찾아뵙게 되었습니다. 리플이 현재 어떻게 움직이고 있는지, 그리고 크립토 산업이 어디로 향하고 있는지 이야기를 하는 만큼 해당 내용 리플 홀더분들이 아니어도 유익 있게 내용 숙지하시면 정말 좋으실 것 같고요. 내용이 내용이다 보니 절대 의역이라든지 오역 있으면 안 되어서 영상을 제작하는 데에 정말 오랜 시간이 걸렸습니다. 고생했다고 구독과 좋아요 한 번씩 꼭 부탁드리면서 다른 건 몰라도 좋아요는 꼭 한 번씩 눌러주세요. 제가 영상을 제작하는 데에 큰 힘이 됩니다. 그리고 일부 영상 못 보신 분들 같은 경우에는 꼭 챙겨 보시고요. 영상 링크 같은 경우에는 더보기란에 달아놨습니다. 그럼 영상 시청하시겠습니다.
You mentioned Rlusd의 and Andy asked one of our guests this earlier, and I want to get your opinion on it. Do we need so many stable coins? What is going to happen in this world of stable coins as this industry becomes more mature?
You know, we don't need that many stable coins. There's reasons why you might want more than one. There is actually
you
some special.
Two, right?
well, one is diversification of risk, right? It would be really weird if we built this entire DeFi ecosystem that's all decentralized and it's all based on Ripple's like reserve, and if Ripple collapses, the whole system collapses. There might be people who don't trust Ripple. I don't know why they wouldn't, but and they wouldn't be able to use Rlusd, and obviously the whole world, right? So yeah, you can make an argument that there's some small number. But there is some specialization that really does happen. Stablecoins aren't yield bearing, and so that they're not volatile, and they're tied to jurisdictions. They're tied to particular entities. So you could sort of imagine a world where you have this proliferation of millions of stablecoins. I don't think that's, millions is obviously not true, but like a large number. I think there probably will be a bit of a shakeout and some consolidation. But I do think, 5, seems like roughly the right order of magnitude.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's special about Rlusd there? What are you going in with as the competitive advantage?
Well, Rlusd is issued through a U.S. trust based in New York State, which is like the gold standard for reliability. The reserve is just cash equivalents, short-term treasuries. It's audited on a regular basis. So as far as like the compliance, it's a gold standard. It's backed by Ripple. Ripple has an enormous balance sheet. We've been here for a long time. We're being as transparent as possible. So to some extent, all of that is table stakes, but we want to make sure we do that exactly right. We're going to be using it in our own payment flows. There's going to be applications in DeFi, a movement of value cross-chain. I think as we turn that curve to mass adoption, not just institutional adoption, but mass adoption, there's going to have to be ways. If my money is over here and I need to buy groceries, there's going to have to be ways to move. And I think the Rlusd is going to be well positioned to be that sort of value movement.
Do you think that there's, I was, on some podcast at some point, somebody made a great point that some payments need to be really, 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 really secure. Whereas if I Venmo Jen money for lunch, she knows where to find me if the payment fails. There are different layers, and Jen might be willing to pay less for security for the lunch transaction than moving $10 billion. Do you think that that's true, and does that set the stage for different levels of speed and cost versus security? How is your company thinking about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
There is not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. There's not going to be a one-chain world. It's not going to be a one-product world. There is no conceivable universe where Ripple is the only successful blockchain company, right? Like that's just impossible. There's going to be a broad range of things that people need, and you called out an important one, which is like there's applications that are not very cost sensitive, and you can trade off cost for many other things. There's applications that are just super cost sensitive. There's cases where speed is of the essence, and then there's multi-million-dollar transactions where making sure that we don't do it if we didn't really want to is of the essence. I think you're going to see that spectrum. We focused, as Ripple as a company, like in our enterprise products, is focused mainly on institutional payments, where there's that balance. They're cost sensitive, but they're very sensitive to things like 24/7 availability, compliance, and then bringing costs down. But yeah, I think you will see a whole spectrum of products. And you see chains that are focused on very fast payments, chains that are focused on very high security. And I think that's definitely why interoperability is going to be so important. If I have to try to figure out where your money is and if we have to work out the interoperability as humans, it's going to be inconvenient. It's going to have to just work.
You mentioned institutional adoption as the next step on the way to retail adoption, that real mass adoption. What needs to happen from an infrastructure perspective for this industry to be ready for that?
Well, there's a whole bunch of different pieces that we need, but one of the big ones is we need products that just work, that are easy to understand. We need people to be able to get their money in and out very easily. They need to be able to pay at retail points of sale. On the institutional adoption side, compliance has to be worked out. We need clear regulations, particularly in the U.S. If you look at I used to think that, if the U.S. is not a friendly regulatory environment, just do it elsewhere. It doesn't really work. The U.S. puts its tendrils through. There are many people who are like, we'll tokenize like U.S. treasuries, but we won't have a U.S. regulatory nexus. You can't build a business that way. So it's going to take institutions who commit and who stake out, space in a growing part of the industry.
David, thank you very much for joining us here.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So nice to talk to you.
네, 앞선 영상 잘들 보셨을까요? 오늘의 영상 요지는 바로 이것이었죠. 이제 진행자가 그러면 수백만 개의 스테이블 코인이 생길 수도 있지 않냐는 질문에 이제 데이비드 슈월츠는 수많은 스테이블 코인이 존재할 필요는 없다라고 밝히면서 리스크 분산, 즉 해지 기능과 이제 기능 특화를 위해서 일정 수준의 다양성은 필요하다라고 언급을 했으며 궁극적으로 5개 정도의 스테이블 코인이 시장에서 살아남을 가능성이 크다라고 밝혔습니다. 그리고 다양한 결제 유형에 따라서 맞춤형 블록체인이 필요하다라고 언급을 했는데요. 결제는 목적에 따라서 점심값이라든지 이제 시장을 본 비용이라든지 수백만 달러의 거래대금 그 쓰임새나 규모가 다르죠. 이에 따라서 보안성, 속도, 비용 효율성 등의 요구가 상이하니 단일 블록체인 솔루션만으로 모든 수요를 충족할 수가 없음에 이제 상호 운용성 같은 경우에는 필연적이며 사용자가 체인을 구별할 필요가 없이 자연스럽게 자동으로 작동하는 환경의 구축의 필요성을 강조했습니다. 그리고 마지막으로는 방금 전의 내용과 어느 정도 일맥상통하는 부분인데 대중들에게 광범위하게 채택을 받기 위해서는 다음과 같은 요소를 갖춘 인프라가 필요하다고 했습니다. 직관적이고 사용자 친화적인 제품 설계, 간편한 입출금, 소매 지점에서의 실사용 가능성, 명확한 규제 환경과 기관의 책임 있는 참여를 꼽았는데 마찬가지로 사용자의 이제 불편함을 최소화하는 알아서 자동으로 작동하는 인프라가 필요하다는 것이겠죠. 자, 여기까지 리플의 CTO 데이비드 슈월츠의 인터뷰를 모두 보셨는데요. 영상을 보시고 난 이후에 여러분의 RLUSD와 그 다음에 리플에 관한 생각 어떠신지 정말 궁금합니다. 댓글로 자유롭게 의견 남겨주시고요. 저는 또 더 좋은 영상으로 찾아뵐 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 긴 시간 시청 고생 많으셨습니다. 감사합니다.